Good afternoon and welcome to Today on Bay TV. I'm Liz Cairns and this is Gaynor Morgan.
And we're joined today by our showbiz editor Keith Millward and by Stefan Brzezelski from the Welsh Conservatives. Thank you for joining us, both of you.
Welcome both. Shall we delve straight into On This Day?
Oh yes, please, yes.
In 1865, Lewis Carroll publishes Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, but was soon withdrawn because of bad printing. Only 21 copies of the first edition survived, making it one of the rarest 19th century books
But that's worth a few bob.
Alice in Wonderland.
I'm sure we all remember.
Oh, yes.
Shall we have a quick little look?
Oh, yes, please, a recap.
Back down memory lane. I think the adaptations that we all know are slightly different to that.
Where
I
was
thought that was
made?
Bay TV back in 1865. You know.
Which one was I then?
How did that happen?
It's a lovely story taken at face value, isn't it? But I think there's a lot more to it probably than we're all sort of just reading the book.
I remember
or watching
being
the
ill
film.
one day, and as a little boy, and I read the whole book in the day, you know. So whenever I think of Alice in Wonderland, it takes me back to that time.
It's quite magical once you get drawn into it, isn't it?
Oh yes.
Definitely.
But I wonder, if it was published now, if it was dreamt up and written and published now, what would people make of it?
I think people would be
It's
asking.
quite different to what it was back then.
Yes.
They'd be asking, what is he on? You
Well,
know?
that's what I was thinking, yeah. Possibly a question, but anyway, it's given us all years of, generations and generations
definitely.
of enjoyment,
yes,
isn't it?
yes, still, and also many adaptations with Disney and musicals.
Yeah.
And, yes.
Keep the story going anyway.
Yes.
In 1922, the death of Alexander Graham Bell, the Scottish scientist, was credited with inventing the first practical telephone.
Oh, right. The telephone, not the phone. The
No, the telephone, yes.
I was just about to say, look at where we are now with phones and
Yes.
smartphones, and
I know.
back then with the telephone boxes.
Well,
and
somebody rang me yesterday. Now we call it the landline, don't we?
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, well, I never answer this phone." He said, "Yes, I'm surprised to get you." Because I just never. I don't use the landline unless I
Mobiles
want the
have taken
speakerphone.
over.
yes.
Definitely. They've just taken over our lives, though,
Yes,
haven't
I
they?
didn't have a telephone at all till I was about 21. You know, it had,
My age, then.
There we are. I'd be ringing if I was away. You know, we'd arrange a time that I'd ring my mother at another telephone box.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
so that used
That's
to go
right.
on.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, our phone number was 126. So if you think of Buckport Call and Pretend, I can't remember what it was in David's home in Marloes. It's something quite low as well. There were only quite a few numbers, really, a few hundred numbers, because the outlying farms and things like that had the phones because they needed them.
Yeah.
But streets and things you didn't. You know?
Lovely
I still remember when
days.
you used to get the yellow pages through the letterbox.
Oh, yes.
And they were a big, thick booklet, and then
right,
you get that. But now it's all mobile. You can just Google it. And the phrase goes, Google it, and you get it straight away.
That was the worst job if you were a journalist on the Sunday afternoon shift. If you had to trace someone or somebody was in the news for some reason, you had no way of tracing it. No shops were open or anything. And of course, if it wasn't in this big, thick yellow book,
Yeah.
just be in trouble.
Should we have a little look at the video?
Oh, that would be rather nice. Yes, please.
In 1874, Bell began experimenting with the phonautograph, which drew the shapes of sound waves based on the vibrations they made. This led to investments from two wealthy patrons who were looking at sending multiple telegraph messages on the same line. This enabled him to develop his acoustic telephone, and he applied for a patent in 1875, which was granted in 1876. This was controversial, as another inventor, Elisha Gray, also developed a telephone prototype at the same time, and the actual inventor of the telephone is still in question, although Bell is credited with the invention.
Wow, no, that's very interesting, isn't it?
We've got a lot to thank him for.
We have indeed.
Oh, yeah. Well, on a good day.
Does anybody ever remember when we've seen that then, using a string and that, and
Oh, yeah.
and holding it to use? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't say how successful they were, but
Before my time, there used to be an A and a B box. I
That's
remember.
right, yes.
So I've seen those in museums. Yes, my
The
grandmother.
museums had to use one. You had to put the coins in, didn't you?
Oh, right.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that. That was quite a step change in rite of passage when you'd learn to use a public phone box. Really, at the age of about 5 or 6, I mean, you wouldn't be allowed now to be sort of, I don't know. Life's changed a great deal.
Definitely. Definitely. In 2014, 49-year-old Stuart Kettle completed his challenge, this is a bit of a random one, to push a Brussels sprouts up Snowdon using his nose. Now, it took him 3 days, but, which I think was really, really nice, it did raise more than £6,000 for Macmillan Cancer
Oh, well,
Support.
that's
So that's, I think it's really, really commendable.
I hadn't heard of
3 days,
I think we're going to be treated to a vision of this.
Yeah, shall we all have a
splendid
look?
endeavour.
Have no doubt you gotta get out. Tell everyone about Brussels sprouts. Have no doubt you gotta get out. Tell everyone about Brussels sprouts.
This is the maddest, craziest challenge I've come up with so far. I've done a trial run today. On the 30th of July, I'm going to be pushing a Brussels sprout up Mount Snowdon with my nose, again for Macmillan Cancer Support. The levitation challenge earlier this year has topped me over now the £40,000 mark raised for Macmillan Cancer Support, and I'm not going to stop. My challenges are going to get wackier, and today just proves it.
Whatever possessed him to
Heard
think
of
of
something.
that?
And what state was his nose in after? I've always wanted a smaller nose. Perhaps it's one way of...
smelling Brussels sprouts for a while.
Oh, heavens, yeah.
Christmas
definitely.
parties. I know a little trick that we can all have a go.
I don't think he'd be eating on Christmas Day.
Yeah,
Can
I
you
hope
imagine if he
nobody was
like
obliged
that?
to eat it
Well,
afterwards.
hats off, 'cause I've never even walked up it. It'll probably take me 3 days to walk it, let alone push it up with my nose.
I know, but fair play, mind. £6,000
Oh,
for
that's
Macmillan
wonderful.
Cancer Support.
Well, I think he deserves to earn a lot more than that.
I know.
What an endeavour.
6,000 Brussels sprouts next time.
I thought he would have just dressed up as one or something, but no.
What else have we got?
1880, British Parliament officials adopts Greenwich Mean Time, GMT. We have some footage from the Associated Press of Britain's switch to GMT.
From now on, Britain will be waking up to lighter winter mornings. Moving our clocks back 1 hour has reintroduced Greenwich Mean Time into our daily lives, although the international time zone system has been based on the Greenwich Meridian since 1884. Greenwich Mean Time has a global significance for navigation and astronomy. This 24-hour clock has faithfully kept GMT in spite of our fickle domestic timekeeping.
We live in such a time-driven world, don't we, that we don't know what it was like before we had time. No. Before we were so time-pressured, really. and
Yes,
Yeah.
very much. It's down to the half hour. I'm thinking I have to be there or whatever.
Definitely.
But I wish they wouldn't put the clocks back in the winter. I don't know. It's something to do with farming, isn't it? Is that
blame
right?
us.
Look at Adina.
No, but I really wish they wouldn't change the time.
No, that is it's
I
very
don't
disruptive.
don't like the dark evenings. It's
No,
I think that's what epitomises winter, though. You get the dark evenings, you get the early mornings, the light mornings. And I always remember thinking the night before, we get an extra hour in bed, so you think that things like that. So then the Sunday morning comes then, and then it takes you time to adapt to it as well yourself. You're getting up, and then as Keith
It's very
says, to do with the
disruptive, I
farmers.
think, yeah.
Yeah.
And it helps them when it comes to with their flock and with their farming activities. So I think that we are...
That's all changed now. Farming's very high-tech. Going out with lamps in the morning, I can assure you.
I remember years ago they didn't change the clocks, and I think it happened for a few years. I don't remember, but I remember being in the dark going to school.
With that.
In the dark. Always still in the dark.
Thank you both. Next up, we'll be taking a look at the papers. And we'll see you after the break.
We look forward to that. Plenty of chat. Welcome back to Today on Bay TV. I'm Gaynor Morgan, this is Liz Cairns, and we're joined again by Keith Millwood, Bay TV's showbiz editor, and by Stefan Reshevsky of the Welsh Conservatives. So,
shall we see what's in the papers?
Oh yes, please.
We'll start with the Western Mail. Millionaire women lose out in state pension age rise. And also on the Eye, women pay the price on pensions. And they say change the state pension age has already left 1 million women worse off. Delay from age 60 to 63 boosts government finances by $5 billion a year. And young women also paying more tax into the system than ever before.
It's not fair, is it?
I think we've got to look at the way in which the decision was originally come to in 1995, and that's to equalise this.
You wouldn't if you were a woman expecting a pension, but
then what you've got to look at it's a fair and sustainable method to look at the life expectancy of individuals now. People are living longer, so now people are now receiving over 24 and a half years on average years of state pension age, which is the highest in generations of ever before. So they are now going to be receiving more for longer. But because of the equalisation in state pension age.
But the gripe by 2030 that would even out.
But the gripe that friends of mine would have is that they had the expectation of leaving work at a certain age and having a state pension, which isn't that much money anyway, but they were expecting that. And so many people are just absolutely worn out. The health is
it beggars the question then, but when do you do it?
The
state pension age had to be equalised because we go on about equality of genders as well. And we're looking at the differences between men and women pay gap in the context of the BBC a couple of weeks ago. So therefore, we need to be equalising the state pension age to ensure that for future generations, and so we're looking towards the future as well as the present.
I think what's also impacting the women at the moment is if they are, say, 60 and they're not yet 63, and they in ill health, they can't continue working. So between that gap, they then haven't got that pension. So what do they live on then?
I would agree that there needs to be something they looked at in those circumstances. If they're 60 years old and they do taken off work with ill health, there does need to be something in place then for those individuals. Yeah. I would agree with that.
There are people on relatively low pay who have worked harder than men. It's not really about gender, but it's a fact. They've worked harder than men. They're often the main homemakers, the main childcare, and also the sandwich generation where you're also looking after your parents, carrying it all, literally running out of steam, having been paid less in their day job than their husbands. And then suddenly their expectation of having a slightly easier life is just taken away, and I think that is really harsh.
But I think it's worth noting, coming back to the point that you made, Liz, but women now paying more tax. I think that's a good thing that women are paying more tax. It means women are earning more money, that living wage has now been introduced, so that's a good thing that's coming in, paying more into the Treasury and therefore more coming back with things such as state pension, invest into the public services. So that's something that we should be congratulated and so look at where we've come from, look at where we are now, and I think that's definitely something that we should be, I would say, that we're applauding the government on.
Well, it's just...
It's tough, though, isn't it, on the individuals, with the men as well, with the pension age rising, you know, but even more so, obviously, with the ladies. But I think if you have expectation and then you're disappointed, you know, it's going to be easier, possibly, for future generations, but it's a bit tough on us, isn't it?
I think that a major cause of stress in life today is that you can't plan anymore, you can't be sure anymore, you can't be certain of the expectations that really in my generation you'd have had a job for life if you were a teacher or a civil servant or whatever. None of that anymore, really. And I think that's quite hard for people to take.
Well, I think in a government's perspective, you're always planning for the future. You're always planning for what can we do to make our children's and grandchildren's lives better, but you've also got to keep an eye on what's going on in the present. So then I'm planning for the future if you're in a job. The best way to do that is to stay in employment. And whenever you feel then...
That's easier said than done.
Well, obviously...
Once you're older, it's very hard to get a job, I think, particularly if you're a woman.
Well, I think that definitely is the case, and barriers need to be addressed when it comes to that. And they talk about the glass ceiling, which we hear a lot in American politics. The glass ceiling needs to be smashed. And I think that there's steps being taken to ensure that glass ceiling is broken.
It's impossible to get around it because once you're doing a CV, even if you don't put in the year you were born, I mean, it's evident just by the way you put your CV together, whether you take O-levels or GCSEs or whatever, it's pretty obvious, you know.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a harsh call.
Well, yes, exactly, especially with all these WASPy women fighting for the cause. So we'll just have to see what's going to happen with them. And hopefully they will all be, like you said, subsidised or something whilst they are waiting.
Yes.
Moving on, this is actually online, it is everywhere. Barcelona forward Neymar. He's discussed now that it's going to be, and if it does go through, it'll be a world record, 198 million transfer fee with Paris Saint-Germain. Now, he's only 25 years old as well. It's not so much him as a player. That isn't what the question is about. It's the amount of money. And should you really put all that money into one person?
He doesn't get the money though, does he?
No, it's the club that gets the money.
No, it's the club, but it's for that one person.
Paris Saint-Germain will pay Barcelona and that's 198 million pounds. They're talking.
Yes.
There's 222 million euros. So I think, on a personal perspective, if the club wants to pay that much for a player, then they're perfectly entitled to do so. But there are UEFA regulations around that, where clubs now have to be are not allowed to make a loss of more than 30 million euros a year. So that's where to see if Paris Saint-Germain will be compliant with the financial fair play regulations. And if they do, and that's where the controversy has come around this transfer fee.
And when you think Swansea, Berger Baston, his was 15 million? The difference in comparison there. I think we're looking at the difference in the clubs as well. Yes, we've got stats showing the highest paid.
Here we are. Puts our pensions in perspective, doesn't it, really?
I know, exactly.
Neymar's there again.
Yeah.
71.5 million to Barcelona.
Obviously, he's a good football player, but is anybody worth his money?
Well, I think you're seeing now that the transfer markets have inflated somewhat. That's been argued the last couple of years, where there's a lot more foreign investment into British clubs and European clubs. So then you could argue whether they're worth that much, but you see now the TV deals that they've got with companies such as Sky. Sky are paying record amounts for revenue now towards these clubs. So if they've got the money and they want to invest in that player, it's like a business, it's a risk, because whether that player will perform or not, but then if that risk pays off, then you can reap the rewards from it.
I find it amazing, though, that football players and the amount of money that is entailed within football, and as a government, we can't even afford to get... Well, it's true with the electrification to reach to Swansea. It's true, but yet, where's all this money coming from? And it's probably the public that's paying all these footballers.
Well, bear in mind, this is private investment.
No, I know, but it's just amazing.
We've got to be efficient with taxpayers' money and look at what's given to us as evidence-based.
And do Swans fans take the train? Perhaps we should move on.
Well, they won't be going on the electrification train, will they?
We've still got the dual fuel train, which will come in the autumn.
Yeah, that's true. We saw that the other day, actually. Yeah, we did.
It was on Monday, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yeah. We must touch on, in the Daily Telegraph, Prince Philip, he's decided to step down. He says there, salute to 70 years.
Obviously, he's got a pension.
Well, yes.
He's come at the age of 96.
He's the longest-serving consort in British history. He's done so much.
I looked at some statistics. Since 1952, there's over 22,000 individual visits that Prince Philip has been on.
We've actually got some footage of him as well, visiting places, yes.
Let's start with the 60s. In this decade, the Duke announced that British women can't cook. He famously said he would like to go to Russia very much before accusing the nation of murdering half his family. He asked Tom Jones if he gargled with pebbles and said of the royal family's finances, "We go into the red next year, I shall probably have to give up polo." When looking at Ethiopian art, he said, "It looks like the kind of thing my daughter would bring back from school art lessons." And the Duke said to a nurse in the Caribbean, "You have mosquitoes."
Well, whether you believe in the royal family or not, he's done a good job within the remit of...
Without a doubt, I think what we've seen is with the monarchy, with the stability now with Queen Elizabeth and also with Prince Philip. And we look at various programmes and the investment that brings to Britain. There's The Crown, which has been on Netflix, which has had huge amounts, which was quite a lot based on Prince Philip and his earlier life and marrying into the royal family.
He gave up a lot, didn't he? You know, he has got a short fuse, hasn't he?
Well, that is argued, but I wouldn't know myself.
My daughter and I wound him up, and he did rather bark at us, and she said, "That's no way for Prince to treat his people." At 3 years old.
I think he's been very dignified.
I think he's deserved to stand up.
It won't be the last that we see of him, though.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Stefan.
Thank you very much.
And Keith, of course. After the break, we'll be keeping Keith and talking about showbiz gossip.
Here. Welcome back to Today on Bay TV. We're joined by Keith Millward, our showbiz editor. Thank you, Keith, for staying with us.
Yeah, so what have you been up to lately?
What I've been up to? Well, it's not only theatres. I do go elsewhere.
You gallivant every now and
I'm
again.
always gallivanting, yes. But this weekend I found the sunshine, actually, because I went on a trip on the Balmoral from Penarth. And that was a very special trip because he took us up the Avon Gorge.
Oh, that's unusual. It's a steamship, isn't it?
That's
you go
right.
straight across, doesn't it?
The steamship, the Balmoral. And they have to get it right with the tides to get to Bristol. There's only certain times of the year they can do that trip. But we went there. But not only there, we went under the bridges as well, the second Severn crossing and the traditional Severn Bridge then, and I have got some VT, some video for us all to enjoy, hopefully. Oh, here we are. Yes.
So where are you now?
Well, we're just coming up to the old Severn Bridge. Yeah. You know, we could make our way up the river then.
It must have been quite a weird experience.
Well, yes. Well, I've got hundreds of times me going to London. All these times, it does go into the hundreds. I've gone across to London, and it's was our vein, wasn't it, to London? Now the second crossing actually cuts on the time of our journeying to England.
Of course, I remember them opening the first bridge.
Oh yes, I remember the trips to the bridge when it first opened. And
it's a bit rusty underneath. Oh dear.
But we did find the blue skies and the sunshine.
Gorgeous.
It really was quite stunning to see it from that
Did you go into both bridges? Or?
Yes, the two bridges, yes. You know, so, but that's the second one.
So how often is that journey made?
I think it's only once or twice a year.
Because of the tides?
Yes, because of the tides. You know, and they do even go under the Wye bridges, one that goes over the extension then of the traditional Severn Bridge, of the original Severn Bridge. But they actually go under the Why? But that's very, very rare. There's one trip coming there, but they've got to be extremely careful. They've got to be extremely careful, you know. So, but that was lovely, you know. So, it was a joyous day out on the
another adventure.
Yeah, it was an adventure. But then the rest of the time it's been lots of theatre visits. Last night was the Addams Family, and that's playing at the Wales Millennium Centre.
Is that the Addams Family used to be on television?
Yeah, Addams Family, Deadladum.
That's a theatre.
Yeah, well, yes, you have to see. But it is a Broadway show. It's written by one of the modern writers, Andrew Lipper, and it's starring Les Dennis in Cardiff at the moment, and Samantha Womack.
I'd forgotten all about the Addams Family.
Oh, yes.
Such fun. Was that funny old granny, wasn't it?
Yes, there was. The old granny. There's a wonderful line. He says, and how long has your mother been living here? He says to Morticia, and she says, your mother? I thought it was your mother. so that was a lovely line. It's my favourite line.
I'd forgotten about Morticia as well.
Yes, or Gomez, Morticia, kissing her up the arm.
Dark makeup.
Yes, and Uncle Fester. It's Les Dennis's Uncle Fester in it, you know. So that's a treat for the holidays, then, isn't it? You know?
That sounds lovely.
But there's lots going on here or coming up here, and we are going to be having guests within the next few days from the Dylan Thomas Theatre, because the Lady Killers is there, the great British comedy, and that's playing.
I remember the name, but I don't remember much about it.
Yes, the Lady Killers. So that's playing from the 16th to the 19th of August, directed by our friend Davina Morgan Harvey, and so that's going to be a hoot. They've been putting on some great productions recently at the Dylan Thomas Theatre, so they're on the crest of a wave.
So it's a comedy?
Storyline?
Well, it's about gangsters, really, you know, and again, a little old biddy of a lady, you know, and she is sort of unaware of what's going on under her own roof. You know, so
sometimes the best way.
Yes. But,
there we go.
But there's some plays coming up in the Grand Theatre, and next week is Trespass by Emlyn Williams. And,
gosh, that's a name from the past.
Yes, 8 to the 12th.
One side now, Keith.
Can you
you're not a little like it.
It's been said. It's been said. Things that knows. Oh, dear, dear. But with the Emlyn Williams play Trespass, it's about somebody wanting to bring back her loved one. So using different mediums to try to bring him back. But there's undercurrents and there's goodness knows. We'll have to find out, won't we? You know,
that was one of his themes, wasn't it? He seemed to like that sort of interplay with the world.
Yes. Night Must Fall, I remember. And,
sort of ghostliness. I can remember being involved in some of the plays in the Little Theatre in Porthcawl, and there were always these sort of ghostly elements and things to make your skin crawl when you were a kid.
Well, the week after is Strictly Murder, and it's by Brian Clements and Brian Capron, who was in Coronation Street. He's one of the murderers we remember from Coronation Street, Gail Tilsley, if you remember that far back. Yes. You know, he tried to murder her. And but Strictly Murder is set in 1939. It's about an English couple living in Provence, but the husband isn't who he says he is. So I think his name is Peter, and his wife is Susie and Peter, and so she is shocked when she finds out his real identity. But we have got a short film if there's time to show that.
What do you do, Mr. Meredith? Out here in isolation, and if you'll forgive me for saying so, obviously not of independent means, how do you survive?
I help out in the fruit and grape season. Do a little driving for a local farmer.
That's odd. I bumped into a peasant type on my way here, and he seemed to think that you were some kind of artist, painter.
Oh, I dabble. More of a Sunday painter for my own amusement.
Apart from that little hotel on the hill, there appears to be nothing and no one for miles. You must like your own company. Or do you have a companion?
There's a woman.
Yes, my peasant type told me that too. And conveniently, she appears to be out at the moment. Does she know that your name isn't really Meredith?
She knows nothing. Do you hear? She is not involved in any way.
He used to look evil in Coronation Street, but there he looks even worse, doesn't he?
There we are. Remember him now, don't you?
Yes.
You know? So with theatre, with yourselves, though, you know, what do you like to go to, or have you been to see things?
Well, I always like the whodunits, but looking back to that, to the 1930s, the late 30s were, I think, a poignant time because they were quite an innocent time, and there were lots of these sort of whodunits and murders and
the Christies,
all those sort of things, sort of the mid to late 30s, and really the general public had no idea of what was coming. It was like a sort of an illusion of a time, you know?
Yes, yes.
I know my mother was a teenager in those years, and it seemed to evoke that kind of theatre where people almost wanted to be scared, and yet there was this horrific thing with World War II coming up on the horizon, and people obviously weren't really aware of it.
Point, isn't
yes,
it?
I think it's very
point. There's another play next week that's down in Llanelli in the Furness Theatre, and that's Bread in Heaven, written by Jack Llewellyn, and Jack Llewellyn is in the play. I know that on Friday we have Jack Llewellyn and Dennis Jenkins here, also known as Denny Tup. They are both in the play. So is Kevin Johns, who was in with us last week. Yes. He is in the play, and Nia Trussler as well, Nia Trussler-Jones. You know, so that's one to be seen. It's the follow-on to Grand Slam that we remember. Right. So the Maldwyn character is played by Dennis Jenkins, Denny Tup, and it's about going to the 2011 New Zealand Rugby World Cup. Then, you know, so Maldwyn, you know, leads them on the trip again. Yeah. So great.
What did you say, Dewi Tup or Di Tup?
Denny Tup. Denny Tup. Oh yes, Denny Tup. Oh yes, very well known in Llanelli.
Yes, couldn't make it up. Thanks, Keith. As ever, mine of information, entertainment to the bottle. Now, after the break, we'll be joined by Swansea City Opera artistic directors Bridget Gill and Brendan Wheatley. So we look forward to that. Welcome back to Today on Bay TV. We're joined by Swansea City Opera artistic directors Bridget Gill and Brendan Wheatley. And I think...
Yes, so Brendan and Bridget, you know, what can you tell us about the Musical Roots project that you've been working on recently?
Well, it's a fairly big project involving so many different groups. There's a lot of groups of immigrants that live within the community of Swansea, so we were working with them to find out about their culture and what they bring into Swansea, as well as...
Which particular countries are you talking about then?
Well, a lot of the countries, we had a Chinese
we worked
group.
with the Chinese Community Centre,
yes,
the African Community Centre, YMCA and Unity and Diversity, and they all took a different form of their cultural heritage to portray, and we did that lovely day, the festival day in the...
Which I came to, yes.
Well, the Chinese ladies decided to do theirs through dance, based on blue and white porcelain, the ancient Chinese blue and white porcelain.
We have a photograph to show, so hopefully that comes up as you describe.
Oh, isn't that charming?
Yes, they were beautiful, really beautiful. And then the African Cultural Centre, they did cooking and singing with the Sisters of Sanctuary, and dancing and drumming. YMCA did it through music and composition from all the different nationalities of people they had there, bringing that sort of feel of their music into a composition for the actual day. And which was the one I missed out? African Centre, Chinese, YMCA, yeah, Unity and Diversity.
Oh, yes.
They're a drop-in centre.
Yes.
For refugees and asylum seekers, and they did it through storytelling about the countries that they came from and their journeys here, some of which were very poignant.
And there was also a showing of Dido and Aeneas then, with a different take, though, wasn't it?
Well, Brendan will tell you this.
Well, that was... we involved 4 schools in that. They were the Bishop Gore, Blaenau Maes, Cefn Hengoed and Parkland Primary School. And what we did, we used Dido and Aeneas as a basis, because, again, it's to do with immigration, because Aeneas himself, through the battles, left his own homeland, went to Carthage, falls in love with Dido, and she with him, but then he is called back. So there's a lot of appropriate material there. But instead of just using the Purcell version, we let them have their take on it. Oh, right. So we used parts of the Purcell in the music, and we had some of our professional singers in there to sing parts of it, but then they did their own take on the other pieces. They were absolutely fantastic. That must have been
so interesting. What transpired from that? Were we surprised by any of it?
I was very surprised at how much they took on board and the amount of work they put into it, because there are at these schools, again, a lot of these children are from different countries. The languages, the number of languages that are spoken at these schools is amazing. And in one scene in particular, they actually used 5 languages in the scene.
And you have an exhibition on at the moment in the museum. And tell us a little more about that.
The exhibition is Tim Stokes, that came on your programme before. He did loads of photographs and video of the whole thing.
This is the Waterfront Museum?
No, this is now the Swansea Museum,
right.
in the room on the left as you go in. So really like to encourage all your viewers to go and see it. It's lovely. So there's many, many pictures there, the costumes there, videos running there. The Unity and Diversity, we have a sort of display of cardboard boxes and suitcases signifying how they came, and you can hear their stories as you poke your head in a box, that sort of thing.
Oh, how lovely.
So
we've got some film of the Dido and Aeneas, so that'll give a flavour, and then this is also shown in the exhibition.
That's right, yes, that's right.
Aeneas, bold, handsome, a warrior amongst men.
Love of Dido's life. Make way for warrior Aeneas.
Prince Aeneas, that's me. I'm the honest boy in all the tribes. No one has ever...
Oh, amazing! Oh, nice run.
I am the honest boy. I was trying to tell him I'm the honest boy in all the tribe.
Aeneas, I got you! Wow, 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 wow.
has ever defeated me. Prince Aeneas. Prince, among others.
Beautiful, fair, and kind.
Love Aeneas. The Queen of Carthage was in misery.
So I suppose this works in all sorts of levels, does it? Making the great classics and the great stories accessible to youngsters.
It's a case of breaking down. Not only are they involved and it's teamwork, but it's breaking down barriers about opera as well. That there is so much rubbish talked about opera that it's only for posh people. And it's not. It's such an inclusive art form. And if you can get at these people early enough, these young people, it will break down the barriers.
Yes.
Yeah, because education in schools is obviously difficult, but to include opera in what they're doing, even if it's just a few minutes every other week or something. I mean, if they had a music class which would talk about or give examples of rap, garage, jazz, all of that sort of stuff. Yeah. But then just included in that a little bit of opera, just so they're exposed to it early enough.
You actually used If You Leave Me Now, didn't you, as one of the modern songs within the opera, which is great, you know. But interested in how you have your funding then, you know, because it's Swansea City Opera, and so.
Well, these particular projects, the one with the community groups was funded by the Heritage Lottery, and the one with the schools was funded by Arts Council Wales. This year, unfortunately, Swansea Council stopped all our funding, which is a shame because they were just, you know, they were wonderful projects for Swansea, so we were upset about that, but there we are.
It's pretty ironic, really, that they're stopping funding for our opera company, yet they've applied for the City of Culture.
Yeah. And I imagine it's a full-time job just applying for these grants and this funding, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. We're lucky enough to have found somebody who's very good at applying. I used to do them all, and it just defeated me, really. You have to have the speak.
Yeah. And the other thing is that without the core company, doing these offshoot projects is very difficult because they're all bolt-ons to a company that exists.
Yeah.
So if we lose Swansea City Opera, all of these other projects may also get lost because they're bolt-ons to the opera company itself.
So how did it all start? How did it come about in the first place? Good question.
Long time ago.
We met in a chorus in a French opera house in Marseille. That's how we met.
As you do, yeah.
As we do. And we had an idea. I mean, it took us 3 weeks and we moved in together. That was how sort of immediate the love affair was. But then we had an idea of trying to do our own thing. And I was teaching singing up in London. We started a very small thing in Merthyr Canol Community Hall.
Up in Brecon, yeah.
Yes, up in Brecon. That the local people loved, and from there we went into theatres just with amateur opera, really. And then we had a big break. English Heritage asked us to organise outdoor opera in their castles around the country. So for 4 or 5 years we did that, very large outdoor events, and also a bit with the National Trust. And then from there we started going into theatres. But with Swansea, they first came in with funding in 2004. And then we changed our name.
That was on condition.
Opera Box.
We were Opera
Box, and it was on condition, we got the funding, that we changed our title to Swansea City Opera, which is what we did. So now the funding's stopped. I don't know quite where we are, really.
You know, we might get to the City of Culture and then everything will change again.
We might, fingers crossed.
No, I hope so, yes. But it was a splendid project, Dido and Aeneas. So I'd urge those who would like to see the exhibition, which is running at the Swansea Museum.
Yes. Anyway, thank you for joining us. It's been very illuminating.
Big thanks to all our guests for joining us today.
And don't forget, next on Bay TV, we've got our afternoon matinee movie. It's the 1957 musical After the Ball. Join us then.